Obviously, I got in shape. I won. Everything was gold. But during the perfect prep was like the perfect nightmare.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Scott McNally, the producer and editor of everything Think Big Bodybuilding Media and our audio affiliate Advices Radio. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for listening and watching all of our programming. And second, on behalf of Ron and Dusty, I'd like to welcome you to our first ever best of episode of It's Just Bodybuilding. So as a fan of the show, I've pulled together a bunch of different clips that I found to be either educational or entertaining or motivational, and we've compiled them here today. If you'd like to skip around, you're welcome to. We have timestamps in the show notes. And one last note, I have to tell you guys, full disclosure, that the guys did record an episode this week. Unfortunately, due to a technical glitch, the audio is not going to be usable at all. It's totally distorted. We can't play it. So I'm very sorry that we had this issue, and rest assured that there have been steps taken that to make sure it won't happen again. Nonetheless, the guys didn't want to go a week without putting another episode out, and so we've compiled this for you today. I hope you guys enjoy, and I will look forward, just like you, to seeing Ron and Dusty back very soon.
I put up a post about, you saw my side lateral post?
Yeah.
And there were some guys arguing on there. And it's the usual thing where it's, they're not actually disagreeing, but it's the semantics of it that make them argue. You know, they think they're on different sides of it, but it's just, I hate seeing that. It's like how when Meadows and I were talking about how, you know, people say I did 4 sets of 10, and some go, well, that was only 2 sets of 10. And it's like, well, okay, these weren't to failure, but I still count them. You know, it's all semantics. Yep. And you know, the one guy was saying, oh, you know, this is bullshit. You know, Phil Heath doesn't use progressive resistance, progressive overload, you know. And then that's what I mentioned with Antoine was I was like, well, yeah, but he had to add weight at some point.
Yeah, he didn't walk in the gym the first time and do 405 or 25 and just stay with that.
Yeah, he might not have log booked. He might not have written his reps down. But you can bet that when he got in a machine and he went, oh, I just got 15 reps, I should go heavier next time.
Yeah. Right.
There was progressively overloading was a principle that he might not have been thinking of and using the term, but it's still, you know, it's still what he was doing. You know,
it's like when you go back to high school and you think about, you know, the bigger, faster, stronger kind of routine and stuff. It's like last time I got 3 sets of 3 with this, so I'm going to go up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, the whole idea of even those programs were, you know, I don't know. Did you ever see that program?
No, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
So that one basically was like one of your weeks would be 3 sets of 3. 1 week would be, you know, 5 sets of 5. One would be 10, 8, 6, and then one would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So but then you'd go back, just like anything, and now you're back to 3 sets of 3, and you're trying to up that weight. You know what I mean? So it's funny, like you said, that all of these different programs are really the same thing. You know, it's just a matter of the weight or the reps, I should say. You know, I've had so many people go, well, why'd you write my routine rest pause to 25 and you wrote this guy's to 15? And I'm like, well, he's 26 and you're 42.
Right.
I'm just protecting you.
Yeah,
you know, like I don't rest pause as heavy as I used to. Now it's, you know, 20 to 25 is kind of where I'm like, and part of that is age and part of that is strength. I'm like, you know, the other factor is if I'm using a machine, like I can't put enough weight on it to do 15. I mean, that means my first attempt is 8.
Right.
Just, you know, I can get 15 with the stack. You know what I mean? So it's getting guys to kind of process that mindset, you know, or the same reason I don't use a lot of dumbbells. Well, it's really hard for me to progressively overload a dumbbell movement because I can only go up in 5-pound increments. And at some point, that's going to be too much for one side. I know what you mean. You know what I mean?
Right. And so one thing when I trained with Meadows a couple weeks ago, we did a rest pause on the lying leg curl.
Yep.
And I was just like, you know how sometimes when you train with somebody, you just use whatever weights they use?
Yeah.
That's how we trained. Like Meadows, me and my training partner. My training partner is a little stronger than me on legs now because he's growing like a weed, like everyone who trains with me for any length of time. So he's growing, his legs are, he's getting real strong. So he's stronger than me and John, but we all just use the same weights and we all hit failure with those weights because of how we used them.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I remember John went first on the rest pause and I was like, oh, he went a little light.
Right.
But then I watched how he did his reps. He was doing like stop and goes.
Yeah,
like real explosive with a slow negative.
Yep.
Bam. And then slow negative. And I was like, so we just used whatever weights. Like we went over to the hack and he only put a couple plates on it. And I was like, and then I realized what he was doing. He was doing a cluster set of doom with 20 seconds rest between rounds and like super slow negatives. And then so I hopped in and just did the same thing with the same weight. So you should be able to do that to an extent, like how Antoine was talking about, just training with other guys and using their weights.
Yeah, I think the only factor that changes there a little bit, and I know you don't disagree, is experience. For some guys, it's going to be very hard to do that because you don't really, I get it often when I send someone a new routine. They don't know where to start, they don't know how much to use, and I don't want to be an asshole coach, but the answer is it doesn't really matter. You'll find it, and if anything, I prefer you guess too light than too heavy. I don't want you going for 12 reps and getting 6, but I'm cool if you get 15. Right. So when you walk into the gym like that, that's why the logbook helps, is because a lot of these guys, you need a guider, and the same reason you need to make sure you're understanding your rep speed. Like you said, you watch his rep speed and the fact he was doing stop and goes, stuff like that. I was like, oh, well, of course he's using 2 plates.
Yeah.
Whereas if John was just busting him out, he might have been using 6 or whatever, I haven't trained with John, but years ago he wrote me a couple routines and I loved it because it was so different. And he wrote them very detailed, exactly he wanted everything done. Yeah. And man, for a few weeks, man, like when you do, one of my favorite things he taught me was drop sets on a leg curl, lying leg curl. And then finishing on your very last drop once you're done with 25 partials off the bottom. It's like a 4-inch movement.
Yeah.
Destroyed. I mean, I used to love filming them because it was like involuntary shaking of your entire body. Like my video guy would laugh because he could see me like trying to move the weight 4 inches and shaking all over the place.
Yeah. No, it's I really like those. We just do something different,
Yep.
And but then you take that back to your workouts and it just adds to the toolbox. And it's I saw a great post the other day. I think it was Brett Contreras put it up, and he was like, things that kind of matter. And he's like, they're great to sprinkle in, and it was like, rest pause, drop sets, this, all blah 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 blah, tempo training, negative, focusing on the eccentrics, blah blah blah, all this stuff, and then it was things you should do a lot of, and it was like 3 things.
All you need.
Push yourself, into the high effort reps. Second was try to progress with your weights, and third was like be consistent or something like that. It was just
real basic. that fills the void on any type of training style you could possibly choose.
Yeah. It's just, but it is funny, and that's also like we were saying with Antoine. We've had on. Just think of the guys we've had on. Ian, JP, Luke, Antoine, Jose.
Yep.
Like who else we had on?
And they're all had Chris. I mean, even Chris had the same answers.
Chris has the same answer. Hypertrophy coach.
Yep.
Joe said same thing. They were all really into high intensity, super hard training where the focus isn't on the number of sets you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that what Antoine said today was really key too. Is it's not how he's always trained, but if I were to come along and be listening to this as a newbie, that would be exactly how I train. Because I think the big thing that people understand is, so I made this mistake, so you don't have to.
Right.
And you're still going to, because we're bodybuilders, and typically, in my opinion, if you're a successful person in general, in the back of your head, there's always just work harder. And so you're battling that mindset all the time, even when you know. I mean, there's been many times in my career where I've looked back and been like, man, I was training 6 days a week for 6 weeks, breaking every rule there is. It's not really shocking I didn't have that great of a gain in that blast.
Oh, man. Sometimes I don't know how much I should say and how much I shouldn't. Read the question again.
Story of my life.
What's the dumbest thing you ever did regarding contest prep, dieting, etc.?
Well, insulin was probably my biggest downfall. At 2005, I'll tell the story, even though it's fucking horrible. I shouldn't tell the story, but I'm going to tell the story anyway, just so people can not do what I did. 2005, getting ready for the Canadian Nationals. I was at the show. I flew out to Saskatchewan. I think it was Saskatchewan.
No, that was 06.
That was Montreal. Yeah,
Montreal
so 2005. 2005 was in Montreal, and I was supposed to. I'm not going to name the coach or anything, but I was supposed to take. We were insulin loading for my carb load, so I was supposed to take X amount of insulin and X amount of GH, and we were going to do that leading up to the show, which is not. I fucking hate insulin. I really, really hate insulin. I don't use it. I've used it a couple times in my career, and it's always been a fucking bad experience. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you think we should carb load for the show this way, I'm in, right? I had done it once before, and it worked out well. So I was like, all right. So I loaded. I forget exactly what happened, but I had loaded 80 units of insulin in an insulin syringe, right? But I had also loaded 8 units of GH in an insulin syringe. So both are 8.
Same.
Both are 80, right?
They look the same.
And I put one in one pack in the other side of the same pack.
Oh God.
Now, when it came time to do my I was supposed to do the 8 units of GH before bed on the Thursday night. I ended up doing the 80 units of insulin and then went to sleep.
He's still alive, in case anyone's wondering. That's good.
Yeah. So I woke up. I went to bed at like midnight, I think. I woke up at like 4 a.m. I felt fucking dizzy. I'm like, I feel weird. I'm like, I gotta take a piss. So I got up to take a piss, kind of stumbled to the bathroom. But I thought I must have just been sleeping really hard, so I didn't think anything of it. Stumbled to the bathroom, took a piss, went back to bed. I woke up to the best looking paramedics I've ever seen in my life, because everybody in Montreal is good looking. Picking me. I actually remember that detail, but for some reason, but they picked me up and put me on a stretcher and wheeled me out to and then I got like a hazy point. And then I remember being in an ambulance, and then I remember waking up in the hospital. So that's all I remember after the 4 a.m. piss is being picked up and put on a stretcher, being in an ambulance, being in a hospital. And they're like, they gave the sheet. So at the time, I don't know why, maybe our phones weren't as good back then. And I had a printout of what I was supposed to be doing. And my ex-girlfriend at the time gave the printout to the doctor, and the doctor was like, he fucking did this? And she's like, no, that's what he was supposed to do. He did this. And he's like, holy fuck. And he put me on a dextrose drip. And I woke up, and I'm laying in this fucking hospital bed in the emergency, hooked up to dextrose, and they're like, this is what happened, blah, blah. And I'm like, and then I started.
So she figured out what happened?
Well, actually, she called Paul, and Paul was like, put some cookies in his mouth.
Kill him with a cookie.
Does it fucking work? How the fuck does that work? So
right, but she figured out that you mixed up the shots, is what I mean.
No, she just called the ambulance.
Oh, okay.
So, because
How did she know that you needed it? Were you just?
I was in a. She said I wouldn't wake up, and I was in a pool of my own sweat. Because when you're hypoglycemic, you just.
Yeah.
So I had been sweating all night, literally like the bed was soaked. So, and she couldn't wake me up. So she called the ambulance. Ambulance came, got me to the hospital. Anyway, so I wake up in the hospital, and they're like, what happened? And I start replaying everything, and I'm like, oh my God, I fucking took 80 units of fucking insulin.
Holy shit.
And they're like, well, you're an idiot, and you're lucky you're not dead, and this is fucking insane. Even this paper that I'm holding in my hand is fucking insane, which it wasn't. Now that I look back, it's not that abnormal. But to a doctor, obviously, it's insane.
Yeah.
And so they're like, you have to stay here. We have to hook you up to, and then at that point, I feel fine now. I've woken up. I'm on dextrose. Like the hypoglycemia is worn off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's Friday now. The show is tomorrow.
So I gotta go.
So I say to my ex, I'm like, I gotta fucking get out of here. I got a show tomorrow. And she's like, they're not gonna let you leave. You shouldn't leave. And I'm like, oh, I gotta take a piss. I didn't have to take a piss. I just wanted to see what I looked like. So I take my little thing and I'm wheeling myself to the bathroom. And I get to the bathroom and I'm fucking shredded. Like every
I can hear Aceto's voice. You're gonna be shredded.
You're gonna be peeled.
No, dude, listen. Every ounce of water on my body was gone. Like I was fucking. And this is not to say you guys should do this. Don't.
I was gonna say, wait.
Well, because you sweat it all out, right?
I'm not giving out a fucking prescription. I'm lucky I didn't die. But because I had sweat so much, I fucking was just right. So I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I feel good. I look great. I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Right.
I go back to the bed. I ask the doctor. He comes back. I go, is there anything keeping me here? He goes, no, but we don't feel like you should leave until your the dextrose drip is done. You need to get the sugar in your body. And I'm like, but I feel great. And he goes, I don't think you should leave. I go, you can't make me stay, right? He goes, no. I go, okay, I'm out of here. He goes, well, you got to sign a waiver saying you're leaving. I'm like, okay, cool. So I sign a waiver. I fucking bounce. And all I have on is a pair of hospital pants and no shirt. And I call my coach and I'm like, this is what happened. What should I do? He's like, start eating fucking brownies. I'm like, okay. I'm like, awesome. So I stop at the gift shop on the way out. I grab a bunch of like Danishes and brownies.
It's nothing like hospital brownies.
Oh, it's so great. So anyway, I get in the back of a cab, still wearing no shirt, and I have no shoes. Just
no shoes.
No shoes, no shirt, just hospital pants and my baked goods.
Bodybuilding douchebag 101.
Walking around just shredded.
So I tell the guy, take me to this fucking hotel, whatever. I go to the host hotel. I eat all the fucking brownies. I get there. I get out of the car, and I'm walking through the lobby to get to the elevator to go back to my room.
No shirt on.
No shirt on, no shoes. All the competitors are there because it's Friday.
Look at this fucking guy.
Guess who? Ron, you'd know this. Guess who wrote a fucking article about me being an asshole?
Who?
Gary Bartlett.
Oh, I was just going to say Gary.
Gary Bartlett writes a fucking article in Muscle Mag about how big an asshole I am and how arrogant I am. And I walk through the hotel in no shirt and that blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you motherfucker, I'm almost dead. I'm almost dead. Like the
Oh, man.
So I get this huge reputation for being this cocky fuck. Nobody knows the story. And I'm
and the legend was born.
So then we carb loaded some more and everything. I woke up the next day, got on stage, and won my class. And fuck crushed it. I looked amazing. My body soaked up all that carbs. I was like, I actually spilled over a little bit. That's probably why I didn't get my pro card. But I won the super heavyweight class that year. And that's all. So long story short, don't use insulin. It's fucking horrible. And
but sometimes you win.
Sometimes you get away with it, I guess.
Sometimes you die. Of course.
But one thing I did not fuck up was I nailed my first 5 years of bodybuilding. I got I put on 100 pounds, 110 pounds in the first 5 years I trained. Whatever I was doing there was really fucking perfect. It was very efficient. Right. And it did its job. And I was a tall, skinny kid. I wasn't a big guy. So I filled out a frame really, really well the first 5 years I trained. And I just tried to get stronger on every single lift.
Right.
And all the basics. I didn't do fancy stuff. I did 2 different lateral variations, like dumbbell and cable, dumbbell press, machine press, rear delts. That was my shoulder workout for 5 fucking years.
what I think is interesting too, though, is
add weight to everything as much as you can.
Yeah, just keep adding weight within the form, of course.
Yes,
but adding weight, and it's such a basic thing because I used to hear all the time from people who come in when I own my nutrition stores. Well, I heard that the weight doesn't matter as long as you're hitting the muscle. And I'm like, well, then why do you go to the gym? Why don't you just bust out some cans from your mom's, pantry, some beans, and just hit some ladder raises in the house? I mean, yeah. I can make my shoulders burn if I sit there long enough with, some beans, depending on which ones. Black beans are slightly heavier, but anyways.
No, I know what you mean, and it's funny because all that stuff's true, but it has to be taken in context,
right?
And that's what gets lost. Like, yes, weight doesn't matter if you're going to sacrifice form. That's right. The second part of the sentence.
Right.
But if your form is perfect and your textbook and you're locked in and you're mechanically moving the weight with the target muscle and all your joints are lined up correctly and you're in the groove, then yes, weight then matters a lot.
Yeah. Like, a lot,
right?
A lot.
And yeah, you might move your hands to make the exercise harder, and that might mean you have to take a plate off. But now you're just working in a different context. Now that weight is now the weight you should be using.
Right.
If you move your feet in and it makes it way, way harder, so you have to take a plate off, you're not training lighter. I don't think of that as training lighter because you're still training in a very difficult mechanical position and it's still very heavy.
Right.
Like there's a machine at my gym that I only put 2 plates on for squats, but where I put my feet and with my height and how it's angled, it's fucking brutal.
Right.
But to me, that's a heavy set because I only get like 6 to 8 reps on it.
Right.
And if I add a little bit of weight on it next time, that's progression. So it's not about how many plates are on there. It's about progression from that point with the same form.
Right. And that's the key, like you said, which is with the same form and understanding that as you get stronger and the weight goes up, I think one thing I also like to push is it doesn't make it more dangerous. And what I mean by that is I've had people come in on my posts, if I'm deadlifting 7, 8 plates aside, and they'll be like, that's too heavy, you're going to get hurt. But it'll be 8 reps. And I'm like, but I did 8 reps. Now, if your friend Billy was deadlifting 315 for 2, and his second rep, his back was rolled forward and he barely squeaked it out, you'd be like, good set. Well, but his 315 is actually heavier than my 765.
Right. That's
exactly what I mean?
Right. Like people who say Ronnie Coleman trained super heavy, I'm like, well, he got like 10 to 12 reps with everything. Like for the most part. Like if you watch his videos, he's doing like the 200s for 10.
Yeah.
He's not training in the 6 rep range. So he was actually for pretty moderate reps. He was training moderately heavy, but it's just that he was obscenely strong.
Yeah. That's the thing is, and everyone wants to fall back on his injuries or where he's at now. And I'm thinking, yeah, but how many other guys trained more ballistic than him that aren't in that space? And we all, those of us who are actually in the know understand that what has him in his position now is actually he had some failed surgeries from an initial injury. But at the end of the day, I read that post and it was just one of those things where it dinged even for me, because it's like if I had walked in the gym when I first started and just said, I want to bench 405 for 10. Well, when you're benching 405 for 10, you got a big chest. You probably got big ass triceps. You probably got some big front delts. You know what I mean?
I remember going to your original warehouse where you had the factory and the warehouse and everything the first time I came to visit you guys. And, obviously they can watch the episode. But just being there was like, I don't know if you guys realized what was going on there from an outsider's point of view, but like Jonathan and I couldn't stop talking about it. Like we talked about that trip for like a year. There was so many things that were normal to you guys that were just so fucking next level. And I was like, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Like Rob's like, yeah, I want to be successful, so I just sleep on the floor.
Yeah, we lived out of
office.
I prepped Olympia out of that warehouse.
You lived in like
I lived in a warehouse,
like an industrial warehouse. Like every other girl on Instagram was on a boat, Dana.
And well, you know what? Like things that most people wouldn't do, I like to do. Like we just like to do things different. So I finally, Kaya, stop.
Oh, I miss Kaya.
Hey.
Dogs are always a part of our show. That's good.
So when I think it was the Tampa Pro, was kind of like the first. I did the New York Pro, did really bad for some reason. I thought I looked great, but I did like mediocre. And I took like a year off, like found George. George helped me to get to the Tampa Pro. And instead of just like doing what normal people do, we decided to do the Airstream tour down to the Tampa Pro. So I prepped for like a week and a half, the craziest week ever. The last 2 weeks of my prep was out of an Airstream tour, driving, meeting people along the way, training with people along the way, dying.
Gyms.
Absolutely dying, all before the Tampa Pro, and I somehow got there, and I looked, I got second, should have won. That's just my own opinion. But then did the Dallas Europa the next year, the next weekend, but we just like to do things that no one else does. So like even after Olympia, we did the Porsche tour afterwards when I'm like so bloated and like my ankles are swelling and down to go to Drew's wedding. So we just like to do things that people don't do.
It's crazy. There's Dusty and I were comparing notes here, looking at what we wanted to ask you about. And I have to take you back to your MHP days when you were traveling. This is kind of when I first got to know you guys, but we want to ask you about somebody. We want to ask you what it was like to travel and spend so much time and train with Kai.
Oh, Kai is wonderful. And
I don't think people understand Kai, and nobody would know him the way you would.
I mean, as long as you have like a lot of time on your hands, you can hang out with Kai. So when he says, "Oh, let's train at," Adam says like, "Hey, let's train at 8." You're actually training at like 10 or 11. So you just have to have like a little 2 to 3 hour buffer, but it's fine.
He's got an extra meal buffer.
Right.
He's on bodybuilder time, but like male like for some reason girls are on time. But every time I like hang out with male bodybuilders, I don't know if you guys are like this. You guys are always late.
Hey, we were on right on time.
Eating, or I don't know, but you're always late. Kai is exceptionally late sometimes.
Exceptionally late. He's an exceptional athlete, so he can be exceptional.
Yeah, so he does whatever he wants. But I think the hanging around him is just, as you know, like you've probably been around, and you just feel this like weird aura about him, and there's just something different about him that's so intriguing. And he can be 5 hours late, I'll still wait for him because he's the best. And but like he's crazy like me. Like he'll wake up and he'll do whatever he needs to do to like look the part. And like, I mean, before expos and stuff, I would like go and I would do cardio with him at like freaking 4:30 in the morning, because I don't know why we couldn't wait till 6, but I did it anyway, because why not? But it was just to kind of be around him and be around someone like that has that it factor. And it's really cool and inspiring to be like around him.
Yeah, it was also, I mean, you were both pulling it off, but I mean, at his level, it was sort of unheard of. But just the amount of travel and stuff that you guys were doing, and he's still like showing up and getting second at the O. Yeah. Spending like 30 weeks of the year on the road and just crazy stuff like that. I mean, what do you think the key is for that sort of schedule? Like, what's the mindset when you're doing that stuff?
I mean, you have to, you're a performer. You have to look the part. And as soon as I got like the pro status, I said, like, from that part on, like, I was like, I need to look the part all year round. So like I never really did, which might have hurt me, I don't know, but in my opinion it's only helped me, because when I go to expos, people see me online and then they see me in person, I look exactly the same because, one, I'm not just posting like, hey, Throwback Thursday to when I actually was shredded and now I'm not. Like, I just never did that. So to be a professional and to be a professional athlete, I think you should look professional at all times.
All right, Jose, we're going to get into fun shit now because I want to get some real stories out.
Remember, my wife's here.
Oh, that's cool. There'll be we're so tired about those.
Dusty already told me a few of those anyways.
No, so one of my favorite things that I think people don't realize when it comes to, and first let me add, you've always been a bodybuilder. Like when it's time to click in to prep, you do, and that is one of the things that makes you who you are. But the other is look at your brother, look at you. There is a genetic thing you can't argue. And in 1 year, you have to tell me when it was, but you told me that the night before USA's in Vegas. Go ahead.
It was 2007. I went to compete in the USA, and I went with a crew of my friends, and I was a middleweight. And I was ended up going to weigh-ins, made weight, and Tamer was at weigh-ins with me, and he's like, well, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm competing. He's like, you already won your pro card a bunch of times. I'm like, I don't know, I didn't accept it. I wanted to move up to middleweights. So after weigh-ins, I was starving. We went out for a steak, started having a couple Patrons. We ended up out all night, ripping it up. Ended up winning as a middleweight USA champ. I ripped it up all night.
I just remember because you told me, I can't remember who it was, but someone had walked up to you backstage, and you were like, and they're like, oh, are you cramping? You said, no, I'm fucking hungover. And that guy's looking at you going, and this asshole's about to beat me.
Yeah, well, it was just a good diuretic back then. I didn't know much about diuretics, but I knew if I had a couple Patrons, I'd draw out nicely.
It was all part of the master plan.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had a massive headache, but I was dry as can be.
See, and these are the stories you're not getting on another show because nobody knows this shit.
I've only told that a few times.
That's funny. That's funny.
We had dinner. Dinner went for about 3 hours. And then we stayed at the bar, and I figured I had plenty of time to sleep and rest up. I did.
Sober up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one always kills me because obviously, Ron, you've got guys like me and you on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I'm counting rice grains to make sure that I'm doing exactly what Chris has me doing because me at 150%, I still need the other guy at 85 to beat him.
Right.
So,
I certainly never did it again, though.
Right. You learn as a middleweight, you got away with it.
Right.
like that's such an easy feat. Jose and I did a 3-week tour in Australia 1 year.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
So we had the longest trip, and we finally got a day off on like day 18, and we went down to the Opera House in Sydney, and Jose introduced me to mojitos that day, which I had never had. And I remember because we definitely had a lot of them. Yes, and we were walking to go get some dinner, and we were being loud, I remember. And there was these two cops down at the end, and they're like, hey! And they yelled, and I'm like, oh, shit. I'm thinking, I don't know what we've done, but we're definitely hammered. And the guy goes, Jose, Dusty, we need to get a picture with you. I'm like, oh, shit. Smack over. I'm glad that picture never got tagged because I can only imagine what we looked like in that shot.
That was a beautiful time, though. We were doing some day drinking right on the Sydney Harbor, right by the Opera House. There's all outdoor bars and stuff. So we probably started, it was still real sunny out, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And it went all downhill from there.
Now, I think I may have heard a story about Jose pissing off the dock.
That was there.
Oh, that was easy. That's allowed, isn't it?
That was that night. But the best part was the next day I was like, I go, Jose, I cannot believe you pissed off the Sydney Opera House dock. And he goes, I did.
That's funny. But what about the perfect prep?
Oh, so this is a tricky one for me, and I know you and I have talked about this before. I got so used to preps being agonizing, and exhausting and painful, and all of these things where the food's really low for a long time. You're exhausted. You're dragging. And actually, in 2014, when I turned pro, it was the first time I had a prep that was easy. I mean,
Right.
Easy to the point that Chris and I, Aceto, obviously for those of you who don't know, our emails are very simple. You know, I send him my check-in pictures. He says what to do. I send back the letter K, and we're done. So, I mean, it's literally every other day because you know how Chris does pictures. Well, he gave me a super high day, which of course, as you know, means it might be sushi or cheeseburgers and fries. And I got one. Then I got another one the next day. Then I got a third one. Then we went back to my diet. And this is like a couple weeks out, you know. And then all of a sudden I send him some pictures about 2 weeks out, a week and a half out. And I send him the pictures. He sends back, okay, we need a couple more super high days. And I remember my brain going, fuck. Like, I'm not tired. I'm not beat up. I'm eating all this food. And even though the pictures were good, I couldn't get past it in my head. Like, this doesn't feel right, you know?
Right.
And somehow Chris being Chris, he knew. My phone rings. And it's the reverse of every other phone call. He goes, hey, you got to trust me. And I'm like,
he just like read your mind.
I know you're struggling with the amount of food we're eating and that you're not dying. You just got to trust me. And I was like, no, I do. But it was funny because in my head, I was like, well, maybe when I get the cheeseburger, I just won't put any toppings on it. And maybe I'll only eat one. But like I was already deducting in my head, getting it away from exactly what he asked me for because it was too easy. So him just telling me and calling me, I was like, fuck, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm told, eat the food. And it's the reverse of everyone else. I know everyone else is so used to wanting food that they're adding shit. And for me, it was very difficult to have such, I mean, here it was 2014. I've been with Chris since 2010. I'd never had an easy prep. I had preps where I was only allowed to think 1 hour ahead because I thought I was going to die. So that's what I was used to. So having a seamless one really fucked with me, actually. And obviously, I got in shape. I won. Everything was gold. But during the perfect prep was like the perfect nightmare.